personal growth, interpersonal relationships.
Hey, what's up, you guys? Fiona Rene here, and
Samar Poorlakani.
And you're listening to Your Radical Being, where we are discussing our radical beings, so we hope to inspire your radical being. Today's episode, we're talking about some intense, like always, intense labels. Maybe things that people have put on us, maybe things that we've maybe put on ourselves. So to start us off, Samar Poorlakani is in a sweet and sexy unicorn onesie today. She's got pigtails on and she's holding her sweet furry daughter, Lily B.
One of our two.
Lily the cat is, I mean, you guys are going to have to jump on YouTube and check out this episode live and raw because you really can't miss this Persian cat. The Persian cat kind of looks like me. We both have flat faces. You're looking
What are you wearing today over here?
I'm pretty simple, but I'm rocking.
I see what you're wearing now. A Scott special?
I'm rocking the 7Ts. We've got a friend named Scott7, getscottwith7ts.com. And he has a limited edition crew neck sweatshirt that, Summer, I think you have one of these as well.
I do too, yeah. I'm kind of bummed that we're not twinning hard right now.
It's kind of like one of those cool products. It's got a secret message on the label. The design is very hidden unless you look very close.
Kind of the point, right? Like not like being like the logo-less logo.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We're not flashing, we know.
But it's vegan and like good for the environment.
Very
yeah.
Friendly. All of these products are. So I'm just repping the Scott 7 gear today. Very warm, very cozy, just like that unicorn onesie. So yeah, let's just get to it. I mean, I've been thinking about this episode kind of all week. Growing up, even in high school, the concept of being labeled something infuriated me.
Oh, you hated it.
Oh, it made me.
And I love labels. I'm like, let's try to figure out as clear as day who I am and what I have, and you just like hated it.
I really did. I felt like someone was trying to put me in a box, and it made me so mad because there were times that maybe those labels were right, but then there were times that they weren't. So it made me feel like even more of a walking contradiction, which I mean, I am, but I wasn't okay with at the time.
Yeah.
How do you feel?
I have always looked at, not boxes as empowering, but like labels as empowering. Cause the more like when I finally understand something, when I finally have, the puro of my OCD is all the research and information and knowledge and just like, I feel more powerful. Not always. I sometimes feel entirely hopeless with those labels, but like, they can have a lot of big feelings, but I feel that knowledge is power. Like I like to refer to myself as Persian Hermione Granger. So having that information, even if it's a label that's slapped on me by a doctor or a label that puts me in my identity in a particular box, I feel like it can be more empowering for me personally.
Yeah, it makes you feel recognized.
Yeah, and like recognizing myself like that, it's such a big part of how I've spent most of my life not understanding my identity. Like, we talked about this in the first episode where I was like, yeah, Persian is like the first thing I say to like anybody if I were to describe myself. I'm like Persian kitten, princess, whatever you want to call it, but like unicorn in this case. But, it's something that, I think over time, just kind of recognizing all the labels that come with it, like where it's like, I didn't realize I was queer until a couple years ago, but like now that box is there or that label's there, not knowing where I fit in. Yeah.
Seeing other people who have labels and not resonating with those labels, but not having a label of your own.
Yeah.
I think that's where my kind of punk rock, I'm going to rebel against this. Labels, because you guys may have labels, but I don't have ones that I resonate with. So frickin' fuck labels.
Yeah. Right? Although that's a label in itself. You've become a little bit of everything over the years, right? Like we had our punk rock days. We had our like, what was that fucking hat you wore all the goddamn time? Like 8 years ago, it was like a big circular hat. It was a little bohemian, maybe a little, do you know which one I'm talking about? You wore it all throughout your South Asia trip.
That beret. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we have the fuzzy baseball cap days, which I think we're still in. So, but I love that because I feel like, we're not going to be the same person like we were when we were 15 or or 25 or 45, you know, like we're a little bit of all of these things, and that's just who we are. We're like a cocktail of all of it.
Well, I find that it was only until recently when the term non-binary kind of came into existence that I had a respect and an appreciation for labels that I had never had before.
Yeah.
Because I've always felt masculine and feminine. I've always felt both male and female, but I was never gay, even though so many people thought I was queer for the longest time and still do. God, everyone and their dog is like, yeah, Fiona's gay, right? No?
Yeah. I think I spent years thinking that you're a little like hetero-flexible, and you're like, no, not at all.
A lot of people think that. And I think it comes down to the fact that there was a time where I felt that my gender really was a bit fluid, but there wasn't a term for it. And the closest thing was like a sexuality term, which we know has nothing to do with our gender. So, you know, I didn't really resonate with that. And then recently, when the term non-binary kind of came into the public space, I went, oh, that I feel like that.
Yeah.
And it made me
light.
light. It made me feel recognized. It made me feel calm because I didn't have to question in the uncertainty or the unknown anymore. That I could go, yeah, that makes sense for me. I'll definitely slap that label on my ass and call it a day.
Pick that box.
Yeah. So needless to say, I don't think that the old me is wrong. I don't think that the old me, you know, if someone
you just have the language now.
Yes, but just because if someone wears Abercrombie at school and we start calling them a prep, does that mean that that's all they are?
I mean, I think it comes down to just like, stop caring about everyone else. Like, why do I need to label someone else? Why do I need to wonder about their labels? Like, unless someone's told me, like, that judgment is just your own shit that you need to deal with. You know, like, are you afraid of being labeled? What do you think you look like to others? And it's like, I don't remember where I read this, but it was like, you can't care so much about what other people think of you, because the version of you in every other person's eyes is different from the person before. Like, what you see as Samar Poorlakani is not what my mom sees as Samar Poorlakani, is not what my cousin Bethany thinks as is Samar Poorlakani. Like, no matter if I'm my most authentic self with each person, I just slammed my elbow into my desk, we're fine. It doesn't matter, because it's still going to be another version that they make in their head of who I am. Yeah. So, you know, and at that point, it's like the person with OCD is going to say, let go, because you can't have control there.
Yeah. And for me, what I noticed is that the only constant in our entire life, or this is, you know, my words, the only constant in my own life is that I change. Everything else is not constant.
I don't know.
Summer's showing me a quote that is tattooed to her arm that says, "But change came anyway."
Yeah, it was a sign at Burning Man that like 3 different signs spaced out, and I saw this one first, and this was in the middle. And I was going through a lot the first time I went to Burning Man. I'd just gone through like the hardest breakup I've ever gone through, kind of out of nowhere, but was really best for that person and best for us. So, you know, but that helped me kind of like really sink in and just be like, you know what, everything that I thought was permanent wasn't, and everything that like I didn't expect to come happened. And just like this idea of like the 3 signs read, I was not ready for this change is the first one, but change came anyway is the second. And the third one is, and now I am changed. The fucking circle of life.
Cycle never stops.
Never.
But the moment where you changed and it was a single solitary moment of stillness, of change, you're that and then you're this. That is still just as real as it was, even though the change happened again and again and again, and you're moving
gradually, really quickly, like whatever it may be.
I feel like now thinking about not only my non-binary identity, that I don't have to shed my masculine or my feminine. I can still keep them both, but they just equal my non-binary. And it's the same with all of the phases that I went through in high school or in college, where I was punk rock and goth and boho and all of these things. I don't have to shed them and say, oh, well, I'm not that. I'm not that. I can be all of those things. Yeah. And that helps me kind of digest this concept of contradicting labels, because I feel like we are consistently labeled things that contradict other labels that we are. And it feels confusing and
Yeah.
scary that, you know, maybe we're a lie.
Oh my God, feeling like a lie. Talk about imposter syndrome while going through the wave of all these labels until we figure out what works. And even when we do recognize our label, still feeling like an imposter.
Yeah, because
So,
another label is going to come, because another change is going to come.
or even if you understand and accept and embrace, then having other people's opinions of those labels seep in, whether or not they're asked for. I once had someone, the first woman I ever went out with, said I wasn't gay enough. And I was like, I'm sorry, but here I am with you. Like, what does this mean? So, and like, that's never left my head. That's like one thing that's always stuck with me. It's been like 3 years at this point. And so, and it took me like, God, how many years to come out? I only came out 4 years ago. So I was 29, you know, and it was only after someone else labeled me and was like, and called me queer. And I was like, what? I'm not queer. Am I queer? And then like had that whole like moment with myself, but still to this day, having to just be like, you know what? That's okay. That's what they can think. And that's not like, that doesn't matter. Like I can't control what anyone else thinks there too.
And I think that comes down to the fact that not only do our labels change for ourselves over time, maybe they grow, they get added on, but language changes. Words like cross-dresser, transsexual, these are words that were once labeled for people that now they are labeled as something else.
Yeah.
And those previous labels can be hurtful or offensive or, you know, not acceptable. And I have a hard time with that personally because, you know, who decided that the language changed?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I feel bad for my cis hetero father who grew up in a
Oh,
time and space where he's like, this is the English language. This is what I know. And all of a sudden someone says, hey, I know you might have majored in English, but the English language has changed. So that word is not the same word as it was before. Which
yeah.
is even more confusing with labels, right? Especially if you identify with one.
Yeah. The feelings that come up, how defensive people get whenever someone else brings up like, hey, that's maybe not the thing you should be saying, or hey, this is now how I identify and this is my pronoun today. And like there's just so many big feelings for everybody because I think
Yeah.
that change is really hard to like keep up with or understand or
And it happens
really
at different times
embrace.
for different people. But we
It's
want to, I mean, at the end of the day, we don't want to, it's not about being right.
yeah,
It's not about saying,
you're gonna be wrong a lot.
yeah, not my label's correct or this is how it's supposed to be. At the end
Yeah.
of the day, it's going to change. The language will consistently change. And so what's the point? The point is for people to feel
Safe. Yeah.
safe, seen, identified, comfortable. There are times that what makes you comfortable makes me uncomfortable, and that's okay. So let's take that space.
That's one of those grow through what you go through moments.
The quote of our show.
Yeah, right. No, absolutely. And you know, I've been trying to embrace discomfort more in that stillness that we've experienced this year. You know, like this past year has been such a big year for self-reflection. Anyone who wasn't in therapy is in therapy, or you know, anyone who was hustling so much that they didn't have time to think about anything, like got that magnifying glass on their life because we all slowed down. And so I think part of that slowing down is sitting in the discomfort that is our fucking life right now and all the things that we're going through and all the changes, whether or not we were ready for it.
Yeah. And that's my favorite thing about change is that it really puts us from one end to the other end of the spectrum, which everything is on a spectrum. So no matter what spectrum you are sitting on, you're probably floating to the other end of it through the past year. And that helps you look at yourself in a way that, for me, it's like I am contradictory. There are times where I am one thing and times where I am another. And that doesn't make me a lie. It doesn't make me a fraud. It makes me human.
Yeah.
And the only thing I can really do is be aware of it so I can communicate it as opposed to trying to argue with it or deny it or, you know, not forgive it.
Communicate when necessary, you know, like again, no one's entitled to any of that information, what box you pick, what box you're in, what you've done with it, you know, like I think it's just it's a privilege to know that information about anybody. And so
I'll give some people a privilege. I label myself very dominant, right?
Yes.
We've discussed this episode 1. We didn't even have to say anything. People
You know, anyone who meets you is like, okay.
Anyone can hear it in my voice right now. I'm a pretty dominant person.
Yes.
And you could label me as dominant.
Mhm.
But the few people that I've had sex with over the past year or two, they'll tell you that in the bedroom, that is not what I am. I am very far from dominant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would be called very submissive.
There was like a slight wink there for anyone who's not watching this. It was just like,
and that could be shortened to the label of dom and sub. But I'm both of those things, and it made me feel so weird for so long, especially with this past partner that I've had, because he's like, but you know, you're so submissive, but people think you're so dominant. So which one is it? Right? Like I got to pick one or else I'm lying.
yeah.
You know, a lot of people also just assume when they meet me, because I'm so dominant, they're like, oh, I bet she's crazy. I bet she's like a dominatrix in the bedroom. And I'm like, oh, nope.
For some reason, I think it's more like the stereotype of like the type A or the CEO or the person who's like super in charge, like not dominant always, right? But like that person who doesn't want to give up control gives up control in the bedroom, which is where I come in, right? Like I am not dominant in my outward life outside of my bedroom, but I am type A, OCD, all the things that mean that I have to be in control all the time. And the bedroom is the only time I let go of control.
The label may be, well, Summer's a control freak.
Yeah.
But then there's a time in the bedroom where Summer is very far from a control freak. She actually would prefer to have zero control. And it just goes to show that there's a different time and more so a different space for different labels.
Yeah, how your definition differs from my definition as well, with the same word. Yeah, I really like the idea of everything being on a spectrum, because I think when you expect that fluidity, like it's easier to not have expectations, which also means like you get to enjoy it more.
Yeah. And I love the idea of what you said at the very top, coming full circle, about how these labels are so helpful, but not externally.
Yeah.
They're not helpful when you put them on others or when others put them on you. They're really not helpful.
Yeah.
When you put them on yourself, they're so helpful.
They can be so empowering.
Yes, to identify, to see myself in the mirror for the first time and go, yeah,
you're a unicorn. Yeah.
And then it's almost like if I really had to dig internally to find those labels, I had to get vulnerable to find those labels, then it is a privilege for me to share that label with you.
Yeah. Just sweet. I love it.
Sweet.
I love seeing the full spectrum that's been Fiona in my life. You know, it's funny because like it really is more than half our lives. I realized the other day that I did like the math, right? When we talked about how we've met several times, that I met you for the first time nearly 19 years ago. Oh. And like that Fiona is way different than today's Fiona, on top of like everything else we've gone through, right? Like who I was when we met the first time versus like when we became real friends versus like our entire 20s into our 30s. Like it's just, I don't know. I think the spectrum is the roller coaster life that we're on, or the waves that we're riding, or whatever the fuck you want to say.
I am me now.
It's like the Doctor. We regenerate.
Let's talk about Doctor Who next time. That's my favorite. But the things that I did then would label me as a certain person that are not necessarily things that I would do now. Every single person that I met when I was 13 and 14, I showed my tits to.
Yeah, you talked about your tits and like not really in front of me, kind of in front of me, and I was like, who is this person? So terrified, so naive.
I mean, that's like that's how I got to know people. Like, hey, you want to see my tits?
That's literally my first memory of you, was you talking about your tits in the hallway of our summer school as we were trying to get ahead of semester by taking geometry, like the nerds we were, I guess. But like, I remember you talking about your tits, and I was just like, oh my God, what is she saying? What is she doing?
Nowadays, if I did that, I would be like, what are you doing?
Yeah, and I'm the one who's like, well, it's just the body. Like, who cares if it's my tits or my elbow? Like, I'm over, like, we full on switched places, and it kills me. Yeah.
So speaking of tits, next episode, we're going to get a little dark and dirty and maybe talk about some sexy fun times, who we are behind closed doors, and what that may mean for us and other people. So stay tuned.
And I can use the sign that I made that talks about This podcast contains mature language and themes, so please use discretion around children, seniors, and judgy people.
Thank you very much.
Anytime.
So make sure you check out that episode, you guys. Will release next Friday. And thank you so much for listening to our crazy stories. And I hope that your radical being
is embraced a little bit more.
Yeah, we hope that your radical being is embraced a little bit more by listening to our radical beings blabber on another episode. So thanks so much, you guys. And make sure to check us out on Instagram, your.radical.being, and send us a message. Let us know what topics you think we should discuss. This is Fiona Rene and
Samar Poorlakani
signing off.
Bye.